I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council for phones for you, March 10th, 2025. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Tigan?
Here.
Councilor Nishioka?
I'm here.
Councilor Matthews?
Here.
Councilor Gwynn?
Here.
Councilor Brown?
Present.
Councilor Nordyke?
Here.
Councilor Varney?
Here.
Mayor Julie Hoy?
Here. Thank you. Now time for additions and deletions. Council President Nishioka, are there any?
Yes, I move for addition, an information report regarding the airport, which will be 6C on the agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you for the second. And any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councilor Matthews?
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn?
Aye.
Councilor Brown?
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke?
Aye.
Councilor Varney?
Aye.
Councilor Tigan?
Aye.
Mayor Julie Hoy?
Aye. Thank you very much. And now we are on to...
Do you want to go do the pledge?
Oh, of course. I forgot the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilor Tigan, would you lead us? Okay, thank you for that. Now we are moving on to council and city manager comment. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share tonight? Yes, Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to share a couple things that I had the privilege of participating in. On Saturday, March 1st, I was honored to attend and present awards at the Salem Art Association Youth Artist Showcase. And it was a wonderful celebration. Our mayor had been there the day before and selected some award winners of these young artists, and I got to present those awards. The kids were wonderful. The families were all very excited. It was a great event, and this is something that Salem Art Association has taken on. The school district used to do it, but probably due to funding, they needed to stop. So the Art Association has continued it, and the kids have so much fun. And there's amazing, talented kids out there, and they get so inspired. It was wonderful. On Thursday, March 6th, I had the privilege to attend the Mathematics, Engineering, and Science Achievements event for local high school students. It was held at the Garmin Industry Center. And again, the enthusiasm and the smart kids that were there giving their presentations was really marvelous. I really had fun seeing that as well. And then I also want to acknowledge on Friday, March 7th, 1 year after the young man, Jose, was tragically killed in Bush Park, his friends and family gathered to plant a tree, a white oak, in Bush Pasture Park. And so that was also an event that was worth being part of. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Councilor Nordyke.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, one and all. I just want to let you know that earlier this year, I participated in a documentary and a discussion about our unsheltered population in the city of Salem. This was being created by the What's Happening Salem podcast, and was really kind of the genesis of Jacob Espinosa and filmmaker Damian Byington. You can find a number of people participating in that documentary, including folks who have lived unhoused, folks with lived experience. A lot of our community partners participated in that documentary, such as Church at the Park, Community Action Agency, and our mayor was also a part of that documentary. You can now find it on YouTube, and it's called Barriers to Bridges, a discussion about Salem's unhoused. And I recommend folks take a look at it. A lot of folks sometimes see homelessness, but they don't see the work that is being done to address homelessness. And so this documentary sheds a little bit of light into the things that people are doing right now, every single day, to help reduce homelessness one person at a time, and also the variety of perspectives that we bring to the table. So once again, that's Barriers to Bridges. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I would just tag along to what Councilor Nishioka said about the Young Artists competition. I think, weren't there 700 or so entries? Yeah, it was pretty incredible. Some very, very gifted young people in Salem. So that was very enjoyable for me. Yes, Dr. Brown.
I will just give a shout out to Fire Department. This past week, or since our last meeting, I had the privilege to go on yet another ride along, and which I really enjoy. It's kind of like how I get to pretend that I'm somebody, especially when I get a chance to be in the driver's seat of one of their rigs. But I do want to just compliment them just on how quick and decisive they are when it comes to making sure that we're all taken care of. And so kudos, Chief, to you and your team. We appreciate, as always, the things that you do, even while we are sleeping. So thank you for just always keeping our safety at the forefront. We appreciate you and all the effort you do. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Matthews.
Kind of on the similar vein as Dr. Brown, I had the opportunity to do 2 different tours, and one of them was with Dr. Brown. One of them was of the airport this week, and it was pretty incredible just to see the amount of expansion that's happened at the airport just over the last couple of years, and how hard that has been, but how impactful it is for our community. But then second, we also had the opportunity, Councilor Teigen, Councilor Brown, and myself, to do a tour of Guerin Island, which is where our water treatment is. Another thing that you just somewhat take for granted as just a citizen. I know I have, like, the amount of work that goes into treating the water that you have, the amount of pipe that's laid to actually be able to get it to your homes, truly incredible. So eye-opening a little bit. So
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Brown, did they really let you drive the rig?
And we're on record.
They wouldn't let me. That's all I want to say. And I was totally okay with that.
Well,
No.
this was last month. It was Black History Month, so hey.
Okay. That said, anyone else have anything to share tonight before we move on? Acting in charge, Krishna Namburi, anything? Okay, thank you so much. We're on to proclamations. We have none. Presentations, we have none. Now we're moving on to public comment, and we have some.
So you've got these folks signed up. The second one there is, don't ignore that.
Okay.
And then you've got everyone who doesn't have an 8 next to them is speaking to the
First.
airport.
Okay, in the first round then. Okay, great. All right. As your name is called, please come forward to the podium. As you begin your remarks, please state your name, your address, and/or ward for the record. You'll have 3 minutes. When you have 1 minute left, the light on the podium will flash yellow. The light will turn red when your time has expired. I'll call 2 names at a time, so please come forward and we'll get through these comfortably. I see Rob Brunner, or Brunner, and Matt Smith, second. Come on down again, your name and either your address or your ward.
Hello, my name is Matt Smith. I'm the general manager at the Holman Hotel in Salem at 195 Commercial Street Southeast in Ward 2. On behalf of our owner who's attending remotely, Mrs. Vanessa Nordyke, we want to thank you all for your time this evening. Councilors, we're here today requesting an extension on the January and February TOT and STPA taxes and waiving of the penalties, the late penalties for those taxes. I understand you've all been given a letter, a copy of the letter that was sent to the city by Mrs. Sturgeon. The property tax assessment on our hotel from Marion County, which we have appealed, has put the hotel's operations in a very precarious position. As noted in the letter, the per room property tax assessment on our hotel is excessively higher than the brand new Ritz-Carlton in downtown Portland. This has put our hotel in a critical cash crunch while we continue to try and maintain services that make us the beacon of travel for the city of Salem. We are fully committed to fulfilling our tax obligations as we work to resolve this oppressive property tax burden. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is it Rob Brenner next? Yes. Okay, and then Mai Vang.
Madam Mayor, City Councilors, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm not in one of the wards. My wife and I actually live in Jefferson. I'm here on behalf of the nonprofit Angel Flight West. I am the Oregon wing leader and in charge, kind of, sort of running herd on a whole bunch of cats, so to speak, who are our volunteers. Angel Flight West is a nonprofit organization in 13 Western states, and our purpose is to provide non-emergency medical transport to people needing medical care. We do this through the efforts of volunteer pilots. People are not charged a penny. There's no co-pays, there's no insurance, there's nothing. Our pilots volunteer their time, their aircraft, their gas, their oil, everything, with the sole purpose of taking people in kind of underrepresented areas to wherever they need to go to get life-saving care. We also do kids camps for everything from burn camps to sickle cell camps to cancer camps to various things. Again, all of this is done free of charge. We have about 123 people, or 124 pilots in Oregon, similar amount in Washington, quite a few more in California. And we go back and forth over state lines transporting people. This being an all-volunteer organization, essentially we pay for our own stuff. The reason I'm here is to request, as you vote on the upcoming landing fees over at Salem Airport, if it's possible to get a carve-out for public benefit flying. Right now, we've got over 100 pilots in the state. I know I've talked to quite a few other people in my recruitment times, and they say, I'd love to, but I can't really afford to do a lot of flying. A lot of our pilots don't own their own planes. They rent planes. They have anywhere from 3, 4, 5 people going together to get a plane, and then they share it. We try and recruit these guys to do as much volunteer work as they can. We take people from Burns, Baker City, Klamath Falls, a lot of places that just don't have regular aviation service. A lot of our patients, we simply can't just deal with a 5 or 6 hour trip over the mountains, over potholes, that type of thing, and we can get them in and out in a couple hours. Again, it's already kind of expensive for us, and if it's possible to get a public benefit flying carve out on the landing fees, that would greatly help us. Thank you very much, and if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you for your testimony. We have Mai Vang and then Angelina McNabb.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mai Vang, and I am a resident of Ward 6. I am currently a board member of NESCA, and I am also running for City Council Ward 6. But I am here tonight making a public comment as a resident of Ward 6 in support of Councilor Nordyke's motion to make Ms. Namburi the interim city manager. It is vital that we give her the necessary tools to conduct the day-to-day businesses of city government, especially in Oregon's second largest city. I have had the opportunity to meet Ms. Namburi at multiple of my ward's neighborhood association meetings, and it is clear to me that she cares deeply about the city, and she has the wealth of knowledge to be able to help the city navigate through a budget deficit. Ms. Namburi has over 2 decades of experience, and I trust that she will do a good job. So I urge the council and the mayor to vote yes on Councilor Nordyke's motion to make Ms. Namburi the interim city manager. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Angelina McNabb and Ron Peters.
Hi, I'm Angelina McNabb. Actually, Bacon McNabb is on my license, though. I am a 30-year resident of Salem. I've raised sons here. And I didn't want to come in here and say anything, and please God help me with this, because I don't want to get in my flesh and start complaining about the city I've watched crumble for 30 years. I've seen a lot of delay when it comes to things that need to be done, and I've been homeless for the last 3 years after raising sons in the system, and it hurt that this system would allow me to get there. It's a long story. I'm not here to share that part with you. What I want to share is those of you that are responsible for what's happened to me, the targeting of me and my life while you controlled my sons. God has taught me to be like him in how to forgive. Jesus has taught me how to forgive, because I wouldn't be here right now if he hadn't have forgiven me. If he hadn't have died for me, okay? So the bottom line is, I forgive every one of you, and if you ever want to approach me to my face, I can show you that. And I'm talking specifically to Officers Bennett, Ramirez, Diaz, Gill, Michael Beach from the Marion County Sheriff's Department. I don't even know if these people are still around. Jeff Wheeler, that was a sergeant in 2015 for the Marion County. These men who decided that they would take the orders and grab me and manhandle me, okay? But again, that's not why I'm here tonight. Yes, it's important to understand what happened to me in my past, but it's also more important for you to understand that I love this city. I stayed here because God loves this city, and he loves every one of us that lives here, and he wants to see this place cleaned up. So I just want to say, rather than having somebody for the interim, find someone that you can talk to. I would be willing to be interviewed in public in one of these meetings by anyone who wants to ask me anything. And I can take that position right now. I've got nothing else to do right now because I haven't seen my youngest son once in 4 years, 5 years now. So another story. But what's more important to me right now is that the city gets cleaned up. There are too many people out there. There are men with no legs, missing limbs, in wheelchairs, and we need to get these people off the streets. So I guess my time is up. Thank you, and don't judge me by what you're seeing right now, because I tell you, Jesus has gotten me a long way. I would not be here right now if he wasn't real. I would be dead. I'd be sliced apart.
Angelina, thank you for your testimony.
The city councilors don't want you guys to hear that part, though.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Ron Peters and then Neil White.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. My name is Ron Peters, and I live in Ward 7, and I have been the general manager at Salem Aviation since 2003. Regarding last month's airport master plan work session, many considerations have been left out of the presentation for which I would like you to be aware. The most glaring is funding. No one in aviation or in this aviation community would expect a runway rehab to be paid for by the general fund and its dollars, yet they clearly left you with that impression. The examples for alternate scenarios for funding we would suggest would be airports' use of revenue bonds. In 10 years, we could have enough revenue to do this and whatever is necessary. This is how the urban development infrastructure gets done, and the airport could do the same. The FAA policies change. It's currently not eligible for FAA funds, but we have a new president, and after him, 2 more federal administrations. We could look to county, state, and federal funds, and they need to be explored. As Councilor Nishioka had said earlier, something possibly from the state funds and the emergency resilient planning could be applied. Salem-Willamette Valley Airport plays a key role in this statewide disaster planning. Secondly, We don't know if aviation will look like in 10 years. Coming rapidly are electric vehicles, aircraft, excuse me, and they could do taxi flights from Salem to Bend, Salem to Portland, and there's a proliferation of drones and electric aircraft coming. And there's many discussions on the national level on how they will share this space, both on the ground and in the air. In aviation, separation is safety. Runway 3416 would do this. Third, they did not tell you that there's available land that has not yet been developed. There are 10 acres between Garmin and the National Guard. There's more vacancy of land south of Garmin. The airport owns land along the airport way, and there's also shovel-ready corporate hangar lots that have sat idle for 15 years. You should know this when considering the potential of more development of 100 acres along the runway land. Lastly, of the 3 examples for one runway airports, one has to ask these airports, would they take a second runway? Or have they done everything they could to keep the second runway as long as possible? We should maintain our second runway as long as possible and not make a decision too early to eliminate it. In lieu of time, I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. We have Neil White and then Brent DeHart.
I'm sorry? Yes. Salem Airport in Cascadia. My name is Neil White, Madam Mayor and City Council. I'm here, I'm a Salem resident, 581 Fannie Way, Northeast Salem, Oregon. I'm here on behalf of the Oregon Pilots Association to address some of the problems that we are going to be looking at due to major natural disasters. Probably one of the most significant ones is going to be the Cascadia subduction zone. And many of you are already familiar with this information, but I'll just give a real quick overview of it. The last major earthquake, being 9.0 or larger, occurred 240 years ago on January 1700. It occurs the minimum interval of every 240 years, and there's a lot of people that have doubts about that, but it's been occurring at that interval for the last 10,000 years. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. So we were due for another major earthquake in 1940. So we need to, keep in mind that this is a real possibility given the track record of the earthquakes. 15 million people will be living within the impact zone. No power for weeks and months, no fuel for weeks and months, no delivery of food and water weeks and months, no running water for months and years, and no sewer system for months and years. The number of bridges in our region, 621 bridges, will be heavily damaged. 399 will be damaged or partially collapsed. Any bridges built before 1997 will likely be destroyed, and communities will be depending on airplanes for supplies. In the city of Salem, there are 39 bridges. We only have a tendency to think about the bridges that are crossing the Willamette River, the Marion Street and the Center Street Bridge, but there are 39 bridges in Salem that will likely be destroyed, except for 2 of them that were built after 1997 that are seismic resilient. So getting around is going to be a real trick. The Salem Airport is responsible, according to the Office of Emergency Management, for 5 counties, Marion, Lynn, Benton, Polk, and Yamhill County. This census was taken in 2020, so it's going to be have to be increased from there. But we're looking easily at 750,000 people that are going to be depending on supplies from C-17s coming into the Salem Airport for the very existence of food, water, medical supplies, and other emergency relief supplies. So those C-17s that are going to come into Salem Airport are going to be providing about almost 83,000 meals per aircraft, with 17 to 32 aircraft coming per day. Once all that stuff is here at the Salem Airport, what are we going to do with it? How do we get it out if all those bridges are down? Well, there's one way to get it out, and that's the general aviation aircraft.
Thank you for your testimony.
I'm sorry?
Thank you. Your time has expired. Thank you
Okay.
for your testimony. We have Brent DeHart and then Doug Brenizer.
Organizational chart.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councilors. Thank you. My name is Brent DeHart. I do business in Ward 2 at the Salem-Willamette Valley Airport. I've served my community government both on boards and commissions and as a city councilor long ago. My topic is the airport master plan and the recent work session. However, I'm not speaking to the pros and cons of the runway closure question. My input is regarding the lack of transparency and public input over the last 2 years. You have up on the screen and a handout I distributed a City of Salem organizational chart, which clearly shows how this body's boards and commissions that you rely on for advice are on top of the staff. It's citizens, you guys, and then boards and commissions. In this instance, in this topic, there's 2 advisory groups. One is an Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, in which I sit, and the other is a Standing Airport Advisory Commission. Input from both of these advisory groups have been hidden from you. Regarding the Master Plan Advisory Committee, we met once almost 2 years ago. The main topic of discussion at the meeting was keeping runway 3416 open. We never met again. We're the citizen input body for the master plan. You received a master plan update 2 years after we had a single meeting without any input from us whatsoever. The airport manager put our group on hiatus last year using the new airline service as the reasoning to pause the master plan process, and yet somehow separated the question of how many runways we have from the master plan. Well, I don't know any topic that could possibly be more the purview of a master plan than how much infrastructure do we have, where does it go, and how does it get paid for? So it feels to us like it's a purposeful tactic from the consultant and airport manager to bring forward an agenda, provide a one-sided presentation without any public input. I don't know how else we can interpret this. Worse than this, the AAC moved in January 2024 to send a letter, which is in today's packet, recommending you seek an outside opinion on runway 3416 and explore alternative funding options. This recommendation was kept from you for 13 months, and even when specifically asked during the session by Councilor Gwynn, it was still kept from you. It was not forthcoming. As a former advisory committee and councilor, I don't believe it's under staff's purview when and if to send your advisory body's recommendations to you. This fosters disincentive to serve on the city, you get a lack of transparency, and it causes mistrust in the government. So none of you are aware that the AAC has their doubts about the consultant. They have misgivings about the consultant. And even though they they voted to advise you of this, you had no idea when they brought an authoritative and convincing presentation last month. Thank you. Got it in. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Doug Brenizer and Hannah McLaughlin.
Hi, my name is Doug Brenizer. I'm Ward 6. I wish I'd gone before Brent, but this will be a little bit of a repeat. I, for the last 7 years, have been the vice chairman of the Airport Advisory Commission, AAC, and I'm also a member of the Master Plan Advisory Committee. In January 2024, a draft copy of the Chapter 4 of the evaluation was presented by Mead and Hunt, and the title of that chapter is The Facility Requirements, which again is part of the master plan. That was presented to the AAC and in an abbreviated form, more or less, and it was announced that it was a preliminary report. In the report, Mead and Hunt noted that they call it 1634, it's actually 1634, was no longer eligible for federal grant funding or maintenance, rehab, or reconstruction. And as a result, there were three proposals as a part of the report. One was maintain the runway in place. Number 2 was permanently close the runway. And number 3 was shortening the runway. An assumption was made on our part that the final report would contain cost estimates for all three options in order to advise the City Council with all the data they would need to make an informed decision. It was later determined that Mead and Hunt's report would not contain cost estimates for the three options that they were presenting. That, we were told, was outside of the scope of their undertaking. So in January of 2024, a review of the preliminary report was made, and we, the AAC, unanimously passed a motion recommending to the mayor and the city council that additional aviation planning consultant be hired to verify the data of Mead and Hunt, and also to provide recommendations for alternative sources of funding for the preservation of the runway. This came as a result of concerns that came about when Mead and Hunt's report was done for the rehab necessary on the aviation terminal to support commercial aviation. The Mead and Hunt original estimate was $10 to $12 million in repairs and 18 to 24 months to complete. The repairs were accomplished in 6 months and at a cost just slightly less than $1.5 million. So we assumed that they might have some problems with this new report, and we wanted to make sure that that information was accurate, especially since this is a 10-year revision to the master plan. We have to look out 10 years and decide what our needs will be in 10 years. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Oh, Councilor Gwynn does have a question. Thank you.
So if the runway, if 1634, you said one of the options would be to shorten that runway?
Correct.
How long then would that runway be usable? Would it extend the life of the runway?
Well, I think that the point that I took from that, one of the probably cost options might be to shorten it. The smaller aircraft, general aviation type aircraft, can use that runway, and the instruction is land and hold short. So you hold short of the intersection. Well, we can all do that, or for the most part. So that would leave the main runway, 1331, intact, and it would also give us a secondary runway without the full surface needing to be repaired or repaved. Does that answer it? Okay.
Yes, Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. Just to expand on that, hi, how are you?
Good.
When you explaining that shortening it, would it, where it crosses the other runway, is that where it would be shortened, or would it be shortened as it gets closer to the hangars? I'm just kind of curious as to where it would get shortened.
I don't know that was decided. I don't have that information, okay. But I'm assuming that the longer part would be the part we'd keep if we had a choice.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll learn more. Thank you.
You bet.
Anyone else? Thank you. Next up is Brendan O'Mara and Scott Bragg.
Did Hannah?
Oh, did I miss Hannah? Hannah, I'm so sorry. Come on up. That's my fault there. Hannah, and then Brendan O'Mara, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Hannah McLaughlin, and I live at 4193 Hayesville Drive, and I'm here to comment on the proposed closure of the runway at the Salem Airport and why we should keep it. One of the biggest challenges facing light aircraft like the one that I fly is weather and wind, especially crosswinds on takeoff and landing, can be dangerous and can pose significant safety risk. What the consultant didn't tell you is that they use the heaviest aircraft on field as the base for the crosswind compliance, even though that is the least susceptible to crosswinds and only does 40 to 50 operations at Salem per year. For reference, I have done 30 to 35 operations at the Salem Airport in the last 6 months, and of those, only 2 or 3 has the wind allowed me to land on 13 or 31. The rest of the time, I landed on 1634. My aircraft does not have a published crosswind limitation, although the FAA gives me a way to calculate that. And for my airplane, it's about 9 knots of wind. By comparison, the heaviest airplane on field has a limit of 25 knots, so a significant difference. Crosswinds also pose an issue to tailwheel aircraft like my own, as they are more prone to weather vaning, and strong winds can cause loss of control on landing and taxiing in an event called a ground loop, which I can tell you from experience is not enjoyable. And crosswinds also pose issues to student pilots who don't have as much experience. If you look at the data here from the consultant's current conditions page in the master plan, it clearly shows that the wind often favors 1634 over 1331. By airport management's own admission, 70% of traffic at Salem prefers to use 1634, and it's concerning to me that while general aviation makes up a large number of operations at the airport, the consultants are throwing general aviation safety into the inconsequential pile, and my safety and the safety of my aircraft and my pilot friends is not inconsequential. Yesterday was a perfect example of not being able to fly unless 1634 was available, and the wind was too strong to land on 13 most of the day for light aircraft. The consultant's reasoning that pilots prefer 3-4 due to the proximity of our hangars is false and an attempt to discredit us. If the wind is out of the south, I still have to taxi across the airport to get to 16, and it's never affected my decision to go flying. The reason we use 1634 is because of the added level of safety. And if you look at other airports in the Willamette Valley, they all have 1634 or 1735 or 2002, which should tell you what you need to know about the wind direction. The consultant states that despite this being general aviation's preferred runway, they can see the advantage of closing the runway to us, as it will increase development on the airport, which I find unlikely. I fail to see how closing the runway that many of us use the most is an advantage to us. And I would encourage the council to investigate both alternate sources of funding and alternative solutions like shortening the runway to reduce long-term maintenance costs instead of closing it entirely, so that we can continue to operate at a higher level of safety. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I have Brendan O'Mara and then JP McLaughlin. Question? I apologize. You're just out of my...
So, Hannah, if 1634 closes, does that mean your ability to fly, or the number of flights that you would be able to make through the Salem, or we changed the name of the airport, through the airport would change?
It would. There have been days just like yesterday where I would not have been able to safely operate my airplane in the level of wind we had. The wind was gusting, I think the highest gust yesterday was 33 miles an hour, which I personally don't fly in. But when I went flying yesterday, it was about 20 miles an hour, almost directly down 16, and I would not have chosen to land on 13 if that had been my only option.
I also wanted to say, can I say one more thing? I remember your testimony from last time you were here, so thank you. And I also read your written testimony, and I appreciate your willingness to come forward.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, on to Brendan O'Mara and then JP McLaughlin. McLaughlin, yeah. Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councils. My name is Brendan O'Mara. I have served as an Airport Advisory Committee member. I've been a pilot at Salem Airport approaching 20 years. I own a flight simulation business that trains pilots here at Salem. I pay property taxes and hold leases for 5 hangars, and I own multiple aircraft that are also on the field. Pilot, aircraft owners, and hangar tenants at Salem Airport have serious concerns about Mead & Hunt's inaccurate financial estimates for maintaining runway 1634, as well as their complete omission of its critical safety role for pilots, passengers, and those on the ground. During the February 18th City of Salem work session, Councilor Dr. Brown asked why GA pilots need runway 1634. Mead & Hunt dismissed the question entirely, reduced it to proximity to hangars, as mentioned by Ms. McLaughlin, implying that GA pilots are simply too lazy to taxi further. I have never heard a single pilot or business owner make this complaint about taxi distance. Mead & Hunt's claim here is baseless. In my flight simulation training business, we regularly demonstrate the impossible turn. It's a critical aviation principle that we're all trained to that reminds pilots that if an engine fails, especially a single-engine aircraft, on takeoff below roughly 800 feet, it's nearly impossible to return to that departure runway. If all of our departures become focused out runway 31, any single-engine aircraft that loses power below 800 feet will end in catastrophe roughly on top of downtown city Salem. Now, not only does 70% of the current traffic already use runway 1634, but the aircraft most dependent on it are single-engine airplanes, which have the higher probability of these single-engine failures that we're talking about. If you depart runway 34, you're flying out over I-5, more open fields and much less populated areas, which is why we, as general aviation pilots, as previously mentioned, choose this runway or are even assigned it by Salem Tower for 70% or more of the airport traffic operations out of Salem. In the February 18th session, Airport Manager Mr. Pascal clarified this by saying, quote, on most days, the winds favor the secondary runway 34 for smaller aircraft. If you're 30 degrees off on the runway 31, it can make that operation less safe. He further stated, quote, we had a fatal accident on runway 1634 4 years ago, and that runway was closed for nearly a week during NTSB investigations. Fortunately, the airport remained operational on the remaining infrastructure, meaning thanks to having 2 runways. Councilor Nordyke specifically asked about traffic flow with 1 versus 2 runways. Removing a runway increases risks, including the higher potential for mid-air collisions due to all traffic now funneling into a single point of approach, similar to what we've seen in the recent Black Hawk helicopter and passenger jet incident in Washington, D.C. We also have an increased risk of runway incursions, which is where you have one airplane impeding with another aircraft, just like we saw at Chicago Midway recently. Council, I urge you to reject Mead and Hunt's findings as incomplete. Airport Advisory Committee has long struggled to have their concerns heard, and the airport's lack of management with the aviation community is becoming clear. I ask that Council seek an independent third-party evaluation, potentially directed by the Airport Advisory Committee. Thank you. Questions for anybody?
Thank you for your testimony. Now we have J.P. McLaughlin and Scott Bragg.
Madam Mayor, councilors, my name is John McLaughlin. I live in Ward 5. I have worked full-time at the Salem Airport as a pilot, flight instructor, charter pilot, chief pilot, airport bum since 1988. I have about 7,000 hours of instruction given. I have about 22,000 hours total time. Dr. Brown, ride along anytime. You mentioned ride along with the fire department. Councilor Nordyke's been for a flight with my daughter, Hannah, who just spoke, so. Anytime, say the word, we'll get out there and do it. I'm currently chief pilot of an operation that has the 2 largest airplanes based at Salem, one of which is about half the weight of the 737s that Avello flies. So pretty good size airplane. I also own with my daughter one of the smallest airplanes on the field, and we do general aviation. I have a hangar lease, and the company that I fly for has a large hangar lease as well. In short, more runways equals more safety. Mead and Hunt, we're just all suspicious of. I'm sorry, they are telling us that in 2035, it's going to cost between $9.5 and $20.5 million to refurb runway 34. But as was mentioned earlier, they told us 2 years ago it was going to take $10 to $12 million in 2 years to redo the terminal for the airline, and it took 6 months, and it was less than 1.5. They're also the organization that told us some years ago, that if we wanted a longer runway, for the airlines to come visit us, which of course we now know we didn't need, we could take Mission Street, run it underground, extend runway 34 all the way to the post office. So everything they say, I just sort of suspect. So if we could get a second opinion, like when you go to the doctor, I think that would be fantastic. The July 18th meeting, I've got a picture up there that was shown at the July 18th meeting. The left picture shows what the consultant referred to, and I quote, if it were to maintain its current location, end quote, and quote, basically what the airfield looks like today, end quote, is the left picture, which shows no taxiway alpha, basically. The picture on the right is the current FAA chart that shows where taxiway alpha is. They've been claiming that runway 34 will preclude a parallel runway or parallel taxiway to 31 because of cross runway 34. Taxiway alpha currently crosses 34. I don't get it. So I'm skeptical, like I said, of everything they say. Councilor Gwynn asked during the February 18th meeting if there was an airport advisory group and how they feel about the proposed changes. I would have expected the City Council would have known about the AAC and might have solicited some input for the meeting. Anyway, more runways equals more safety, I think, and can we please get a second opinion on some of these costs, because I don't think they're accurate. That's all I got. Questions?
Yes, we do have a question. Councilor Gwynn?
Yeah.
So I know nothing about aviation, so I was going to ask you a couple of what to you is I'm sure, going to be elementary.
I teach people how to fly who've never seen an airplane before, so yeah, have at it.
I ask.
Have at it.
When you referred to runway alpha, what does that mean?
The taxiway alpha, the one that's circled there on the chart.
And then what's the significance of 1634 versus 1331? Is that like longitude and latitude?
Oh, that's an excellent question. No, it's roughly the magnetic heading of that runway, the magnetic course. So runway 34 is roughly 340 degrees magnetic. Runway 13 is roughly 130 degrees magnetic. And they set them up magnetic rather than true like a road map, because in the airplane we have a magnetic compass. So it makes it simpler to figure out how to line up on the runway.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else?
Again.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony. I wasn't on council during the decision to renovate a terminal. I'm curious, the quote that the city received for $10 to $12 million to redo the terminal, is the terminal we got for $1.5 million the same terminal that was priced at $10 to $12 million? Is it?
Almost. They had a couple more bathrooms because they claimed that we required more bathrooms, that kind of stuff. I don't know all the details, but it's roughly the same. Not an order of magnitude different in cost from what we got.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Brown?
Madam Mayor, thank you. So I have a question. It may not be for tonight, but in reference to Councilor Tigan's comment about the fees from 1.2 to 10 to 12 million, can you share why you think there's such a big gap between those two numbers?
I'm not going to take a wild guess. I'd like to
How about
think
an educated opinion?
I'd like to think there's nothing nefarious going on, because I tend to basically look for the best in people. But that's a huge, huge disparity. And if the consulting company is looking at worst case scenario, that's fine. But then they should also offer the best case scenario, which would have been obviously 1.2. So I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. And a lot of the stuff that they say doesn't make sense to me, like the putting Mission Street underground and extending runway 34 through what used to be Capital Chevrolet to the post office. I just go, what? So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Gwynn?
So we have a handful of flights for Avello that come in and out of the airport right now. So do you have any idea, you teach there, do you have any idea how many flights are general aviation flights on a daily or weekly basis?
Oh.
And the reason for my question is I'm just wondering, so Avello's important, right, for our economy, but our general aviation pilots, to me, are just as important. So I'd kind of like to know how many folks here are in favor of keeping open 1634. Would you?
There we go.
Thank you. But then if you know the answer to the question on flights, I'm curious.
Typically at Salem, if you talk to Ron Peters, he'd probably give you, or Brent DeHart, typically there's going to be less than a dozen flights a day that are charter operations or commercial carriers, or even the jets like I fly. The vast majority of these flights are small airplanes like my daughter flies. And the corporate flights that come in, I mean, that adds to the local economy too, but it's a huge percentage is the general aviation. And that's why such a large percentage of the airplanes use 3, 4, and 16. It's a better runway most of the time for most of the planes. Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony.
Dr. Brown, call me when you want to go flying.
So Vanessa is on there.
Okay, I have one more person. I believe Scott Bragg. Come on down, please say your name and your ward or address.
Cool. Good evening. My name is Scott Bragg. I live in Ward 3. I've been a Salem resident since 2019. I've been a flight instructor for 9 years this year. I work at Garmin Flight Ops, and I'm also an aircraft owner. I'm here to help express some of the concerns by many of the people here with the proposed use of the company Vector for landing fees. Part of the proposed landing fees, they would collect the landing fees. This proposal takes away opportunities for locally owned business such as Salem Air Center. Every airport has, or just about every airport has an FBO, and that FBO is a vital part of that airport. Salem Air Center is no different. It's been locally owned since its founding. Many of the previous owners and business patrons still operate out of it today. The FBO supports all aspects of the airport, all the way from general aviation, flight instructing, firefighting, Garmin, search and rescue, National Guard, corporate aviation, life flight, and a velo. Vector will take a portion of these fees as overhead and not support any of these local operations that are much better suited. If fees must be collected, let them support Salem as much as possible. Another concern that we have with Vector is their use of ADSB tracking as part of their infrastructure for fee collecting. ADSB was designed for situational awareness, traffic avoidance, and general safety in the national airspace system. It was never meant for policing or tracking for the use of fee collection. Encouraging this is a gross misuse in this technology. A local FBO can invoke a non-invasive method for collecting these fees and tracking these flights and help encourage the already established relationship with its aviation community. And I would just ask anyone who's also here in favor or not in favor of Vector and would rather support Salem Aviation to please stand.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one person online to testify. It's Vanessa Sturgeon. Is Vanessa there? And Ms. Sturgeon, just so you know, you will be given an opportunity when the item comes up under Section 5. So,
I don't need to testify. Matt testified on my behalf.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that closes our public testimony. I'll keep this one here, okay. And we're moving on to the consent calendar. And before you begin, Councilor Nishioka, I would like to pull item 3.2A for later discussion. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
I move to approve the consent calendar with the pulls of 3.2A and 3.3F. As you heard, Mayor Hoy is pulling 3.2A, and I'm pulling 3.3F.
Second.
Did you guys catch that? I didn't have my mic on. A second by Councilor Matthews. Okay, thank you. All right, Councilor Nishioka, would you mind going over that consent calendar, please?
Thank you. So skipping 3.2A, I'm moving to 3.3, action items. 3.3A, intergovernment agreement with the state of Oregon allowing legislative assembly to use the portion of State Street adjacent to Oregon for 10 years in exchange for $2 million in compensation. 3.3B, agreement with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services and the Oregon State Fair Council for the Silverton Road Northeast Improvement Project. 3.3C, approval of the Fairview Park Development and Management Plan. 3.3D, approval of the Fisher Road Park Development Plan. 3.3E, recommend policy statements and priorities to guide Salem's federal and state agenda and Salem's response to proposed legislation during the 2025 Oregon legislative session. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Any discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Matthews?
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn?
Aye.
Councilor Brown?
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke? Aye. Councilor Varney?
Aye.
Councilor Tigan?
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka?
Aye.
Mayor Julie Hoy?
Aye. Yes, Councilor Nishioka.
I neglected to include the draft minutes for, so my fault. I did not include the draft minutes in the consent calendar for the February 18th council work session and the February 24th draft minutes.
Great catch. Thank you.
Neglect.
Do we need to call the roll again for that? No?
First, we need a second? Oh, we don't.
No, you don't need to.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me add that.
You bet. All right, we have no public hearings. We're on to special orders of business. Item 5A, we have a motion. Councilor Nordyke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would. Good evening, one and all, once again. And I'd like to thank all of members of the aviation community for coming here today and taking time out of your busy days. We know that each and every one of you contributes to our local economy, and that many of you are doing everything you can to help us train our next generation of pilots. As Hannah and many others have shared with me, we have a national shortage of pilots, aviation mechanics, and others in the aviation field. So thank you for what you do every day to make our airport available to aspiring students and other aviation enthusiasts. Now back to the motion at hand. Now for something entirely different. I move to appoint Krishna Namburi as our interim city manager, to direct staff to prepare an interim city manager employment agreement, and to defer any recruitment for a new city manager until at least September 2025.
I'll second that.
Motion by Nordyke, second by Nishioka. And Councilor, to your motion.
Thank you so much, folks. Many of you already know Krishna Namburi. Everyone on this side and everyone in this little horseshoe pit that we call City Council chambers is well versed with Ms. Namburi. Namburi is nothing short of an outstanding individual, and I can think of no better person to serve us in this time of transition. We have a lot on our plate, folks. In addition to an airport, we have a budgetary cycle, we have a city to run, and none of these decisions can wait. They all require constant oversight, guidance, leadership, and respect. And when it comes to appointing someone to serve us during this crucial next series of months, we need someone who is driven, who knows the city inside and out, who has the respect of council and the city staff, and that is Ms. Namburi. She has already been serving as an acting incapacity city manager since February 10, but to provide stable leadership between now and at least September of 2025, we need to appoint her as our interim city manager. By way of background, she has already served us as a deputy city manager and has overseen the Enterprise Services Department. Her professional journey has been marked by a commitment to transforming and leading organizations towards greater efficiency and effectiveness. She has a unique ability to help departments achieve self-sufficiency, foster a culture of growth and development. And not only has she focused on our organizational outcomes, she's also emphasized the professional and personal growth of our employees. That is really important because when you're looking at a budget deficit like we are, staff morale is of the utmost importance. It is really important that we have someone that our staff already know and trust. And she is an extremely hard worker. Her work ethic is beyond reproach, and I have that from multiple sources. One of her most notable achievements has been her successful realignment of strategy and operations across multiple departments. Under her guidance, internal services have evolved from a reactive posture to a proactive approach, ensuring that city government is better equipped to meet the needs of our residents. This transformative work has led to greater efficiencies across city services, making our city more effective in serving the public. Ms. Namburi should be given sufficient time in this interim role to help lead the city through the local option levy election and our fiscal year 25-26 budget process and adoption. Delaying the recruitment for a new city manager until September will allow her to establish stable leadership for the organization without adding onto our very full plate recruiting a city manager. So for those reasons, I make the motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Yes, Councilor Brown.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. To follow Councilor Nordyke's, I would say performance analysis of AIC. I'm not going to touch that because I know that she does a phenomenal job. What I would want to just ask this in a question, and I think the CFO could possibly answer this, Yes, we know we're going through like a budgetary crisis with a variety of things we may have to cut, including, whether it's going to be across the board for some of our services. As we think about planning for next month, budget meetings, and the city manager's salary. So my question involves the severance will be received by the former city manager, but the current acting city manager will not be getting the same pay. Would that be a fair assessment?
Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. So I can speak budgetarily. I can't speak to the actual pay because that has to do with employment agreements and council action. But as far as the actual salary, so the severance is currently expected to run through December. So we're not double budgeting that position. We're budgeting for a single city manager through December.
Thank you for sharing that. It's good to know, Madam Mayor, that there isn't this double dipping that's going on. And so I just want to applaud that particular team and, of course, the city managers in regards to savings.
Ms. Namburi? Yeah, I just kind of want to talk about the compensation. Through this interim, I'm not seeking for any additional pay. So I will be getting paid at the same deputy city manager level. So I think Josh Eggleston talked about it, so until we pay the severance package, there is no additional cost to the city. Thank you.
And I would say that's huge. And thank you, because we all know that we're having to find ways to cut savings, and for the very fact that you are stepping into a large role, and we know from your past that you're going to do a great job. And so for the fact that you're not taking on additional salary, I think that needs to be commended. So thank you. Madam Mayor.
Councilor Gwynn.
For all the reasons that everyone else has, I'm totally in support of this, but Krishna, I want to remind you, you often talk about work-life balance. So my reminder for you is you need to take care of yourself and you need to take time for yourself. So it's a huge burden that you're taking on, and we already know that you're working 12 and 14-hour days sometimes. So I get my only suggestion is please remember that work-life balance that you so frequently talk about.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. We have two major things that we are focusing on right now, which is the budget process that we have to go through and the levy. So I have a deadline, so end of May. But I also want to kind of take a minute to acknowledge, the leadership team. The support from the leadership team and the staff has been overwhelming. So it's not just me, the entire team is kind of carrying this ship. So I very much appreciate the staff and especially the leadership team that has been kind of supporting me through the process. So it's not just me. We have a team working on this. So thank you. Councilor Tigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I kind of, just before diving into this decision, would like to hear from the staff a little bit. This is kind of an HR question, but this is an HR thing. Understanding the difference between Ms. Namburi's current title of AIC versus being an interim, the nature of the employment, is she a protected civil servant now? Would she move to a less protected form of employee after that? Some of this feels, we don't know that she'll serve in the role permanently, and I want to make sure that any transition we make now is something that could return her back to more of a protected civil servant afterwards.
Thanks, Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So the executive leadership team members, essentially the department directors, the deputy city managers, and the city managers all work pursuant to an employment contract, and that provides job security. It provides terms of work and things like that. So the interim contract would essentially, status-wise, right now she is the acting city manager because the city manager position is vacant, so she's just filling in on that. Providing her with an interim appointment provides some stability to the organization and to her as well as council. So she should be in that position officially. Part of that will be an employment agreement that provides similar benefits and responsibilities that the city manager's employment agreement has. And by, there won't be a term for the employment agreement. It's an indefinite period. But part of Councilor Nordyke's motion would be to delay the recruitment of the city manager position to allow her to move into this position and work through these big issues that the city's going through now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. In other contexts where I've worked, if someone gets put into an acting, there can be term limits to that. So 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And I just don't know if something like that exists between the folks who are city staff and the city manager, who's an employee of the city council, not an employee of the city in the same way.
So I forgot to answer the part of your question regarding what happened to her status. So if the employment agreement will spell this out, and that'll go back to council for approval at a public meeting. But essentially, what we've done in the past when we've had interim city managers is that if they come, from internal, they have the right to go back to their current position before they took the interim role. There's also typically in those types of agreements severance benefits that would be provided if, say, a new city manager were to come in and then want to separate with the deputy city manager, just to ensure that by taking this position, they don't put themselves in jeopardy.
Thank you.
Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So to continue on in that question, you stated that we would have the opportunity to see the contract. Is that what you said?
Correct. So we will draft the employment agreement as stated in Councilor Nordyke's motion, present that to council. Council will have a chance to take a look at that. If it looks, to council's approval, it'll come to council for approval at a public meeting.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Councilor Nishioka.
I'll continue on. I want to agree with all of the comments that have already been made. I am incredibly impressed and have been impressed since I've been a counselor with Krishna Namburi. I feel that she will be excellent along with our additional leadership team. And I do want us to remember that it is a leadership team that she will be working with. And I believe in all of them, and I think that all of my fellow counselors do. And I want to reassure the public that we are moving forward and are very happy with this situation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I would just like to add that I think some of those days have been 16-hour days. And to echo the sentiment that take care of yourself, and we are here for you too. Okay, thank you. If there's nothing further, will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Gwynn?
Aye.
Councilor Brown?
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke?
Aye.
Councilor Varney?
Aye.
Councilor Tigan?
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councilor Matthews?
Aye.
Mayor Julie Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item 5B. I understand that Josh Eggleston is going to speak to this issue. Oh, sorry, pause one moment, Josh. Yes, Councilor Nordyke?
Thank you. For item 5B, I need to declare, hold on, I'm trying to find my phone. I need to declare an actual conflict of interest because my employer has received a donation from the Holman Hotel. So I need to step back and not participate in the deliberations in any way. If someone can just text my city cell phone, I'll just be standing right over there.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. eggleston, when you are ready, please go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. The Holman Hotel requests a 6-day extension to pay the December and January Transient Occupancy Tax in the Salem Tourism Promotion Area also known as the STPA, and waive associated penalties. I haven't seen one of these in my tenure, just to be clear, but it is allowed with Salem Revised Code. As a finance officer, I can authorize up to a 30-day extension. The Holman Hotel is looking for a 60-day extension, which is why it's on your agenda with an option to approve or deny the extension request. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Eggleston? Yes, Councilor Brown.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Mr. CFO, you said this is the first time we've received one of these?
To my knowledge, yes.
So are we setting the precedents going forward, or is this like a one-time thing, you think?
Per Salem Revised Code, any hotel operator could request a similar extension.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Tigan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Josh, so the thing that brings it to the City Council is the 60-day extension. Do you receive many 30-day extensions?
We do not receive many 30-day extensions. What we often receive is requests to waive penalties, which we do consider fairly often throughout the year, and they're generally granted if they're in good standing and we've had regular payments. If they have a couple of requests within the same year, we'll likely deny the request. But yes, certainly we see requests for waiver of penalties.
And would you say the Holman Hotel is in good standing? Would they meet your standard for a 30-day extension?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. Continuing on with the question asked by Councilor Tigan. So you stated that not many request 30-day, but some request penalties waived. So that must mean that they are slightly behind?
It could mean they're slightly behind, or they had some bookkeeping error that they file a couple days late, and certainly we don't want to penalize anyone for that because there's the penalties accrue, when they file that day late. So we don't want to. We still want people to file.
Thank you for that further explanation.
Josh, is there any way for you to speak to the high interest rate that the hotel is experiencing right now, or tax rate, rather, I should say?
So in conversation with the Holman Hotel, they're appealing their property tax assessment. One of the reasons they stated is that they're unable to refinance their construction loan. So they currently have a high interest construction loan that they're unable to convert to more conventional financing, which is why they have a larger cash outflow than usual. At least those are the reasons they stated, which is why they're asking for this extension.
Thank you for that. Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you again. The assessed rate that they have, that they're appealing, does not have bearing on the tot amount that they owe. That's based on heads and beds, correct?
That is correct.
Yes, Councilor Matthews.
So the extension is for the January, February top fees and STPA fees, correct?
That is correct.
So does that mean on a monthly basis for these 60 days, they'll still pay the March and the April top fees and STPA fees?
So the TOT and the TPA are paid the following month just to allow for processing. So so for the December and January payments, they would be due April 1st and then April 29th. So I would still expect February to be paid at the end of March. So they would run up where they're paying multiple months all in a similar time period.
Yes, Councilor Brown.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So in that same line of thinking, what happens when we get to day 60 and they need more time? Do we come back here? What happens?
Appreciate the question. I suppose they could follow an additional extension. If they don't make the payment by the date it's due, the penalties would be reassessed and the full amount would be due.
And so the interest would just accrue?
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. The code doesn't allow for interest to be waived, so interest is continuing to accrue. It's really the penalties that are allowed to be waived.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Seeing nothing further, would the recorder, we need a motion. How about a motion? Councilor Nishioka.
How about a motion? So I will move approval of the 60-day extension to pay December and January transitory occupancy tax and the Salem Tourism Promotion and waive associated penalties.
Second.
I saw a motion by Nishioka, and Matthews is bouncing to Varney for the second. So that's great. Any further discussion? All right. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Brown?
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke? Councilor Varney? Aye. Councilor Tigan?
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councilor Matthews?
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn?
Aye.
Mayor Julie Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. We are moving on to item 5C as soon as Councilor Nordyke comes back into the room.
Just for clarification.
Yes.
I believe that when they're all back in, I will read the motion and we
Please.
have a second and then we'll go to discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Nishioka.
So this is the pulled item, 3.2A, moved to 5.C. I move to adopt resolution number 2025-3, modifying certain fees and charges related to landing and aircraft parking fees at the Salem-Willamette Valley Airport, or in parentheses, Salem Municipal Airport.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's a motion by Nishioka and a second by Tigan. And do you want to speak to the poll, or shall I?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. I pulled this item tonight strictly for the opportunity for discussion and any questions we may have regarding the airport parking and landing fees. I was particularly interested in the testimony given by, what's his name? Given by Rob Brunner, or Bruner, about the Angel Flight West and the fees for those particular, that organization and others like it who may be offering a free and much-needed service. And I've asked, may I ask you, City Attorney, to speak to what we can do about that?
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So the City Council doesn't have a generally applicable policy regarding fee waivers, but for those of you who've been on council for a while, you may recall this discussion regarding fee waivers for city facilities like park rentals and things like that. We do have a policy that allows for certain nonprofits to receive a percentage reduction on those fees. Council has the authority to provide a fee waiver for this particular group or other nonprofit groups for the landing fees. However, I caution you that once you open the Pandora's box of fee waivers, I guarantee you'll get more requests for fee waivers for a variety of things, and it becomes sort of unwieldy. So if you'd like, I guess my recommendation is if you're going to go forward with these fees, is to go forward with the fees as is, and we could, staff could bring back a recommendation for you regarding this particular entity or other similar entities.
Any questions or discussion? Yes, Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would. I feel that that would be something valuable to have the staff do that. And if fellow councilors agree, I would then just ask if I would need to amend the motion to state that staff come back to us.
I think staff can go ahead and do that without a revised motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Tigan.
Thank you. I'd like to get a little bit more information from the city staff about the use of Vector for fee collection, and whether that was ever discussed with the Airport Advisory Commission. I don't know if that's a question that can be answered now, or if we need to go back to city staff to answer that.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. John Pascal, Airport Manager. We did discuss, it was last spring, I believe it was in the April AAC meeting. We did a presentation about this company, who they are, showed a short clip off of their airport website, or I'm sorry, their business website, how they collect fees. And we talked about the number of airports across the country that they do business with. So the Airport Advisory Commission has seen that.
And do you have to follow up, Madam Mayor, thank you. Do you have a sense of what their response was? I mean, considering the general sense of people in the room tonight and what we've heard in testimony, like, can you qualify how that went?
I'd have to think back. I don't know that I can speak for the Airport Advisory Commission. I mean, I think a lot of what you've heard tonight is, you know, a nice cross-section of what the response was at the time. I think there are folks that recognize that we have a need to generate revenue at the airport and across the city, but there's also a worry that adding fees could disrupt business, could disrupt operations at the airport and have some negative impact. So I think that might be how I would summarize it.
Thank you. Anything further?
Yeah, I guess I just want to qualify that I sense the tension between the staffing a solution and a non-staff solution like Vector. It clearly solves a problem for us, which is that we don't want to get into a situation of expanding our staff. And maybe it's something to follow up with later, but other ideas that were presented in terms of using the Salem Air Center, the FBO, or someone else to manage the flight tracking, whether that was something, there was alternatives discussed, something like that.
That was what the program was previously. If we went back to the changes in the code that we had here about a month or so ago, that was one of the things that we changed, was that we felt like it was more appropriate for the city to collect the city's fees. We don't have the capability or the equipment or the staffing to try and manage all of this ourselves. There are technological solutions out there. This company does this across the country. It doesn't cost us anything. There is no cost for us to implement any equipment. It's a revenue-only contract. They take their fee, you know, percent of their fee off of everything that they collect, and we receive the difference. So I don't know that we could do even close to the level of accuracy. The FBO is not open 24/7. They have their own staffing issues, their own jobs that they have to do, and tracking airplanes and collecting landing or parking fees for the city is not, I don't think, a practical solution.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Matthews.
Just so I can get clarity on exactly which part Vector is. So is Vector, so obviously it sounds like they're the company that assesses the fees. Are they also the proprietary company that has the technology that puts the tracking on the planes, or is that a separate piece of equipment that is outside of Vector and they're just utilizing an external?
Yeah, there's existing equipment out there already. So you've heard a lot about ADSB tracking and some of the concerns about that. That is one of several ways that they and others in the aviation community worldwide track aircraft. There's also FAA radar. There's also cameras on the field. There's infrastructure that they'll install. There's Mode S, which is just some other technical stuff. So there are a lot of different ways that they can track aircraft across the United States and who came and went from which airports. Okay. But they do all of that on our behalf.
And then how long is the contract that we're looking at signing into with Vector?
We haven't signed it yet. I believe that if memory serves, it's 3 years firm, and then I believe we go to year after that. Okay. Because obviously they'll have to have some time to recoup the cost that, to install their equipment and ramp up the program. Right. And I think it's 5 year total, but 3 years firm. Okay. If memory serves, I can double check that for you.
And then it's a 20% cut that they get off of that. Is that correct?
It's an amalgamation. I think it's going to work out to about 22 or 23%, okay. Depending on the complexity of the program that we put together. So for instance, the larger aircraft, there aren't as many of them, so it's much easier for them to track those aircraft, so they take a much smaller percent.
Okay.
And then the 7,000 and above, there's going to be more of those. So it's in the low 20%.
Okay. And the technology that goes into this, is that something that's left on the airfield if that contract ever goes away, or is that something that they take back with
It
them?
would be their equipment, unless we wanted to. Yeah, the other option would be we could, you know, if we did try and do this ourselves, and some airports have tried, you can have the equipment installed, but it's just very expensive, and then the maintenance requirements are yours. And so in many cases, like airports like ours that run on a shoestring budget, it's neater and cleaner to just have an outside firm take care of it for you.
Just out of curiosity, do we know what the cost was for install?
I don't.
Okay.
Yes, Councilor Gwynn.
I guess my question is there urgency? I mean, we're moving into a season where we're going to be working on the airport master plan, right? So is there any reason we couldn't deal with this at the same time? I'm gravely concerned, like this letter that's been sitting around for 13 months and not brought forward. I'm concerned, and I don't want us to make a mistake. I don't want us to make a mistake on 1364, and I don't want us to make a mistake on these landing fees. So do we have to do this now, I guess is my question.
Well, we certainly don't have to. Staff was mandated to do everything we could to generate revenue in an effort to get out from under the general fund as quickly as possible. This is one mechanism and one way that airports across the country are starting to generate additional revenue. And so that's just one of the solutions, but certainly council can not implement this today if they choose not to.
Because if I remember right from our work session, there are going to be public meetings. We're going to involve the airport advisory, right? So I guess my thought is, why not involve them in all things airport?
Yeah, so the Airport Advisory Commission was involved in this discussion about a year or so ago, so we did all of our due diligence before we brought it to council for a code change. I think you're kind of speaking about two separate things, but I think I understand what you're saying to just bring them all together. The master planning effort that does involve a number of public meetings going forward before we'll be asking council for direction on how to complete the master plan, which involves runways and taxiways and all of the infrastructure, is, I guess, a little bit different than rates and fees and how we're going to generate revenue at the airport. But that's certainly a council decision. It's not a staff decision.
It's Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you so much, Councilor Gwynn. I had some follow-up questions based on that. Thank you, Mr. Pascal. So as I understand it, this resolution, if we passed it, would only change fees for a specific period of time. And I think under the terms of the resolution, it would take effect March 13, and it would be available for until what point in time? It's not clear. It appears that it would be the 2025 fee schedule. So for how long, if we were to change these rates hypothetically, how long would they be in effect for?
We look at our master fee schedule every budget year, along with the rest of the city's rates and fees. So this is just in advance of the upcoming budget, so we're maybe 3 months, 4 months ahead of that.
Okay. And the reason I say that is I don't know what the timing is for completion of the master plan. I'm just wondering, how does changing of the fees today, hypothetically speaking, align with the anticipated completion date for the master plan?
I think what's left in the master plan is probably another 9 to 12 months of work remaining. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know how to answer the question. They're really kind of two separate, sort of an apple and an orange. I mean, we could take this up next spring, and it would probably be lined up a little bit more closely to the end of the master plan. Right. But we'll have another year of revenue that we haven't generated.
Right, and that's my concern, is that if we delay it, we will lose a year of potential revenue, and that revenue is something that all of our residents are looking for. So if hypothetically speaking, council were to implement this now, you'd be coming back to us in about a year, and that would be about the time that the master plan would be ready for its recommendations, and that could include a robust discussion of what the fees would look like moving forward. Is that fair?
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. John, as I was the liaison for the Airport Advisory Commission, you stated that you showed this to them in April, sometime back. But I also want you to speak to the fact that it was also brought up in fall, and then in December we had the special meeting, and that the Airport Advisory Commission did say yes to go forward with this, and that was when they decided to move the weight of the plane from 5,000 to 7,000 pounds, and that's what they came to us with. So they have agreed to this. I just wanted to confirm that.
That is correct. Yeah, thank you for that reminder of history lesson. There's been a lot of moving pieces in the past couple of years, but the Airport Advisory Commission did see this. They did vote on this with the recommendation. Staff recommendation was 5,000 pounds and up. They recommended 7,000 pounds and up, and that's ultimately what we put into the code. I would add too, back to one of the other questions, there is a provision in there that we wrote in for emergency services aircraft. So I think the Angel flight, if they're aircraft that are above 7,000 pounds, there can be an argument made that they would be exempted if they're flying patients out or organs and things like that, because there are companies out there that do that.
Thank you for that additional information.
Councilor Gwynn?
Just for the record, can you tell us what you anticipate the revenue to be for those landing fees?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back and look at my own staff report, but as I recall, we were estimating somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a year.
Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Brown.
Just to follow up on Councilor Gwynn's comment about the fees, so we could really lose that. Depending on how we vote tonight, we could lose that, correct?
It could lose the fee?
Yeah, the amount that we would make.
Well, the fees currently exist. This is just increasing the existing fees, but the implementation of those fees is really what you're talking about. Do we charge these fees? So we currently charge landing fees to commercial operators, like our cargo operators and our airline operators. What we don't charge is for general aviation operations. So I know it's a little bit messy, but it's an existing fee. It's just who we charge it to. If you choose not to go forward with that tonight, doesn't change the fee schedule. We're really here tonight. We're just here to talk about a fee schedule. The implementation of those fees and who gets charged those fees is a different discussion.
I know I was going to invite, so thank you, Mayor. So I would like to invite Director Martin to kind of give more details on this. So Brian, thank you.
Yeah, so Brian Martin, Public Works Director. We don't have a contract in place yet with Vector. You know, John has mentioned that he's been looking at one and reviewing one. If he would like us to go back and look at what would this cost if we tried to implement with our own staff or another third party or Vector and bring something back in the next couple of months, we could certainly do that. Even if you pass this tonight, it's going to take some time to get that contract set up so that we can start collecting fees. So if that is something that would make the council if it'd be easier to evaluate and hear back, we could certainly do that. I guess that was the first thing. And I know there's been a lot of talk about the letter, and the letter certainly should have been shared with you on February 18th. But I can tell you I did see numerous emails between the airport manager and the chair of the AAC talking about waiting until the time was right when the information was going to be discussed. So it wasn't that there was no communication and then it just showed up. There were numerous emails between the two parties about the situation.
Thank you, Director Martin. Yes, Councilor Matthews?
I may have misheard, but it sounded like we were going to start, if this passes tonight, we would start collecting these fees on March 13th, but obviously not having our Vector contract signed, they wouldn't be the one collecting those. So would there be a different mechanism between now and then that would be collecting them?
I would not anticipate that, no, because we're talking about the smaller aircraft and we're not set up to collect those fees on the smaller aircraft yet at this time.
Okay, so it wouldn't actually start collecting then March 13th? Though.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything further? Yes, Councilor Varney.
Thank you. I know I've been kind of quiet tonight. Great questions. I think one of the things that attracts me to these fee adjustments is not only that they were recommended by the Airport Advisory Commission, but also the airport fund forecast anticipates use of $620,000 of fund balance in the current fiscal year to cover operating expenses. If we don't keep working at getting more revenue, I don't know how much fund balance is left in there, but taking $620,000 out every year isn't going to last forever. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Varney. Yes, Councilor Tigan.
I don't have the number in front of me the way that Councilor Varney does, but I think we need to realize that when these funds run out, then it comes from the general fund. This isn't the only parking of a vehicle that we're going to be instituting a change in fees this year. Our downtown visitors will be asked to pay a parking fee to park on the street, and that's a change in that system as well, based on the insolvency of our parking fund. So I think as a council, we know that any potential issue that comes to the city that presents another need from the general fund needs to be looked at very closely, and we don't have extra funds in the general fund as it sits right now to subsidize the parking of vehicles downtown or the parking of vehicles at an airport. So I'm going to vote in support of this.
Thank you, Councilor Tigan. Anyone else? I personally feel that a fee is reasonable. I think that Vector seems to be the kind of thing that is upsetting to folks for some reason, so I would like more information on that and what our other options might be for collection. I also feel very strongly that we have a tremendous amount of untapped revenue potential at the airport, and we need to be looking at things other than fees to draw more revenue from that beautiful piece of property in the middle of Salem. So, anything further? Anything? No? Okay, I think we're ready for a roll call then. Or do we have to make the motion again? Are we okay? Okay, great. Let's call the roll, please. Oh, pause. Oh, can the motion be read again? Thank you.
Yes. I adopt resolution number 20. I move to adopt resolution number 2025-3, modifying certain fees and charges related to landing and aircraft parking fees at the Salem-Willamette Valley Airport.
And was it, who seconded? Was it, oh, it was Varney. That's right. Thank you. Okay, great. Anything further? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Tigan.
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka.
Aye.
Councilor Matthews.
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn.
Aye.
Councilor Brown.
Aye.
Mayor Julie Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. We are moving on to item 5D. Councilor Nishioka, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. This item I pulled, and I will go ahead and read my my prepared motion. I move to approve the appointments and reappointments to the Hospital Facility Authority Board and direct staff to schedule interviews for the 3 applicants for the next Ward 5 member of the City and URA Joint Budget Committee.
Second.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Tigan. Any discussion on that? Oh, all good?
So to my motion, there was 2 applicants for Ward 5 budget committee member when the appointments, the Boards and Commissions Appointment Committee met. But then just after that, a third application came in, and there had not been any set timeline. So I feel that it would be important, as long as we're already going to be interviewing the two that the committee selected to bring forward, that we should include the third candidate that came through.
Great. Anyone else? No? Seeing nothing further, will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Nordyke?
Aye.
Councilor Varney?
Aye.
Councilor Tigan?
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councilor Matthews?
Aye.
Councilor Gwynn?
Aye.
Councilor Brown?
Aye.
Mayor Julie Hoy.
Aye. All right, that was a lot of special orders of business. Now we're moving on to information reports. We only have 2 tonight. I'll read through the descriptive note there, and if you have any questions, just interject. Item 6A, Planning Administrator Decision, a proposal for a building addition, parking lot modification, and change of use to warehousing and distribution and office. Approved. Item 6B, Planning Administrator Decision, a tentative partition plan to create 3 parcels. Approved.
The 6C was added as the letter from the airport advisory.
Oh, thank you for that. Yep. And we have 6C. It's the letter from the Airport Advisory Commission letter submitted. Any discussion or thoughts on those items? No? Okay. Moving on then, we have no ordinances, no first readings, no second readings. We do have a few folks signed up for public comment. Okay, so again, I'll call 2 names at a time. Please come up and announce your name, address, or ward. I'd like to call Christine Young and Tim Cowan.
Hi, my name is Christine Young, and I live at 1676 Cottage Street, Southeast. I am very concerned about the federal employee cuts, which can potentially impact citizens of Salem and their property through flooding. I'm going to ask you to make a contingency plan in case of a flooding event due to employee cuts. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, encompasses weather and river forecasting. The 2 departments share their regional office in Portland, where they share timely hydrologic or water flow data. I'm going to describe the river forecasting job in its context. Our region, which is on a map included in this written thing that I've given you, includes Oregon, Washington, Idaho, part of Montana, some area of Canada, because water doesn't respect human-made boundaries. It's one of 13 regions across America. During the last storm period, Bush Park was temporarily flooded, and the river forecasters monitor that storm system, and during the course of that last atmospheric river, they were monitoring 50 possible flooding sites. Okay, so these employees have to monitor hydrologic events 24/7, 7 days a week. So they receive numerous data points from various locations in the region. They apply computer modeling and create river forecasts. So these river forecasts are important because we live downstream from that dam that's holding back whatever, the Santiam River, Detroit Lake. So the river forecasters send information to the Army Corps of Engineers and say, this is how much water is coming. They don't tell the Army Corps of Engineers what to do. They say, we're projecting this water flow to be in this system. You need to take care of that by opening floodgates or doing your job, Army Corps. So the challenge is that these people who were watching this large region had 11.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Young. You're out of time. Thank you so much for your testimony. We have Tim Cowan, and then I believe, is it Kathleen Joseph? Kathleen Treppa. Thank you very much.
Mayor, council members, for the record, my name is Tim Cowan. I'm speaking on behalf of being the chair of the American Legion Legislative Commission, and want to remind you that we're holding our annual conference in June 18th to 22nd here in Salem, Oregon. We'll have about 450 veterans and their families with them. And if there's anything that we can do while we're here to help with the city, let us know, because we want it to be a great event for you also. As a member of the Salem Rotary Club, Mayor, I would like to compliment you on your presentation on the state of the city. It was perfect. We got great reviews from people on how well the city was doing and the challenges, and it was great. The last thing is, I hate to show you this, but I've been working as a volunteer landscaper for Candelaria Elementary School. I've been doing that for about 3 years, and I just found out how to prune things. But what I'm doing is talking with the superintendent and a board member on if there's a way for a neighborhood to adopt a school and do landscaping for it. It really ties the neighborhood into the school. You wouldn't believe how the kids get excited about it. And I think I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. I like that idea a lot. Okay, Ms. Treppa, please go ahead.
Thank you. Kathleen Treppa, Ward 7. So I wanted to follow up on the last meeting that I attended, just to thank the counselors for requesting additional information from staff regarding the potential impacts if federal funding for various services and projects is cut. And I also wanted to thank the staff for their very professional responses. I, for one, am very concerned that this Trump administration will not honor its congressionally approved and funded programs. So I was startled to learn that at least 3,000 Salem families rely on Section 8 housing vouchers to pay their rent. If we think we have a problem with homelessness now, it's bound to get significantly worse as more drastic, unmitigated, unethical, and likely illegal cuts to federal government programs and services are implemented. Which brings me to the mayor's State of the City address. I'd like to thank the mayor for sharing what she has learned, that she has learned a lot in her first 50 days as mayor, since she campaigned on the inaccurate assertion that the city was mismanaged. Government and governance is a complicated affair. So thank you for acknowledging that there's been no evidence of waste. I would like to point out that financial forecasts are a moving target, and they are updated with more information, particularly as you progress through the fiscal year and more actuals are fed into that financial model. And yes, I do support the community service levy, since now more than ever, local funding is needed to protect local services. What bothers me, however, from the State of the City address are the mayor's comments that, and I paraphrase, there is nothing she can do about the federal funding, or we have to wait and see if there will be funding cuts to nonprofits, or we need to stay in that which we know to be true. What I know to be true is that this administration has undertaken massive cuts to critical services and programs to communities in the U.S. and around the world. There is no indication that they are done cutting, and in fact, they've only just begun. I have never worked for a city in my almost 30-year career that has rolled over and just played dead in the face of massive funding cuts. So I know the staff is working very hard through its means, and likely many in the council are, to support maintaining that funding. So to complete the thought that was started over here, that office up in Portland had 30 forecasters. They've had their staff cut by the federal government, and it's anticipated that more will be cut. And so the concern is that you will be missing forecasting information that is related to potential flood events, and what are we going to do if we don't have that critical information? So public safety needs that, the city needs that, and hopefully there are plans that are in place now to help respond to the potential for flooding, since the federal forecasters are being terminated from employment. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Anything further? If not, we are adjourned.